Thunder counterattack. 2 Eagles. Author, Wild Wolverine. The plane rolled for some distance, headed off the runway, and Goya pushed the throttle back to neutral, stopping the afterburner. After he retracted the landing gear, the plane circled over Bareilly and headed northwest. I know Gudbar's 33rd Wing, a very common tactical attack wing, is all outdated planes. Well, in short, there are some Phantoms and some Chinese-made MiGs. Jafar said in the back seat, his tone quite a bit of contempt. Unfortunately, our route is contrary to the battlefield. Maybe the guys from the Lion Squadron can pick up this cheap. But I believe they will eventually return empty-handed. The day before yesterday, one of their planes was launched far east of Kazua. The Lions are always too reckless. Their tactic is to turn on the radar and swagger and patrol for fear that no one will know, said Gaffer, the weapons operator. Attention Eagle 302, this is the Eagle's Nest. The early warning aircraft at Zindan base has temporarily malfunctioned, and it seems that it has already returned. You are still being navigated by ground radar. Finished. There was a bad news from the radio. The first uncertain event happened. In the tradition of the Indian Air Force, these unforeseen events are always unavoidable. Lieutenant Goya disagreed. He continued to head forward at an altitude of 4,500 meters according to the preset course, maintaining a medium speed, and the course was basically a straight flight. Gradually, the Su-30 fighters approached the line of actual control from the northern hinterland. The radar warning device flickered a few times from time to time. Jafar looked at them one by one. They were all G-band radio signals such as the Ground Navigation Radar or the 19th Infantry Division SAM-6 missile position, not the radar in the direction of Pakistan. The large snow-capped mountains are already in sight. On the other side of the snow-capped mountains is the Pakistan-controlled area. Lieutenant Colonel Moxon said on the radio. Attention Eagle, the Lions are empty, the enemy did not come to Punjab, their signal disappeared, we analyzed that most of them have gone back, and they may be flying in the north, which is your direction. We need you to stay at the border more. A while. Really gone? Over, the pilot asked. Not sure, just disappeared on radar, there are so many mountains here that it's hard to keep track. It's important to note that their Phantoms can fly super low for a while. If these Phantoms go low north along the border, you can destroy him at a distance, never get too close, said Lt. Col. Sinner, whose first thought was always to save the squadron's aircraft first, even against a Mirage 3 made 40 years ago. Hopefully, they took advantage of the nearby mountains to avoid radar tracking, Goya said. I suggest you keep your altitude and turn on the fire control radar, said the lieutenant colonel. Received. Lieutenant. 2 had a hunch that he might hit straight ahead this time. If the enemy was sneaking northward along the border, he might be in a small right azimuth, that is to say, some kind of condescending trailing state. He did not turn on the radar according to the command of the lieutenant colonel, but just turned on the power of the IRST equipment and entered the infrared signal scanning state. This is a passive search method that is not easy to expose himself. At close range, there is a field of view close to the radar and more good target resolution. The radio stopped for a while, and then rang again. Eagle 302, this is the Eagle's Nest. Bad news, the latest information, Kargil's forward base was attacked, these bastards, as expected, are heading north to avoid radar, they have tricked our air command, son of a bitch. 181 Squadron, the early warning aircraft unit that is in danger of failure, ... Lieutenant Colonel said. Lieutenant Goya thought to himself, how could this be bad news? Is it because the army lost a few bunkers? In his opinion, this is an excellent opportunity for meritorious service, but he can't say it. Fortunately, we also kept a hand, and you are still in the air. Continue to search towards you at 12 o'clock, remember the rules of engagement, only long-range attacks are allowed, not close-range combat. Understood? Oh, right, and one more thing, missiles can cross the line of control, but your aircraft can't. It's Congress's business, not yours, to start a war. Received. Goya pushed the throttle forward and the seat started pushing his back hard. The plane quickly accelerated to 850 km per hour. Obviously, the enemy planes should not flee westward immediately after dropping bombs. They would presumably use the mountains to hide for a while, as they did when they came surreptitiously. The lieutenant made a wishful thinking and rushed towards the general direction. The lieutenant colonel's rules of engagement had long been ignored by him. Are we turning on the fire control radar? Increase the search distance. Asked Jafar behind. No, that will only startle the snake. Goya is very clear that the target that the ground radar cannot detect must be hiding behind the mountain. It is foreseeable that they are trying to slip away in a big circle, because the further north the mountain becomes high. Have you seen the snowy ridge ahead? We'll be able to find something when we cross over. However, the rules of engagement prohibit us from crossing the line of actual control. Don't worry about it so much. If I guess correctly, they are fleeing at about 1 o'clock, at an angle of 90 degrees. In this situation, we can definitely fire first. Goya lowered the relative altitude to 2,700 meters all the way, and the ground ahead the mountains were clearly visible, and he leaned slightly to one side, slid down the slope and slid across the snowy mountains along the ridge. Contact with the ground was immediately cut off, and a few seconds later, his head-up display showed something, a thin line made of a series of light spots. The infrared search and tracking system seemed to have caught the enemy plane. I can't see very well, maybe it's a very small plane. The laser ranging failed, it's still too far, maybe 25 kilometers ahead, about 1,600 meters high. To Lieutenant Goya, good, the downside is that the enemy puts his butt on him, so that he can sneak up on him with just a little time, while the enemy plane is still in the dark. The downside is that if ground-based radars on nearby enemy positions are turned on, they will also reveal their whereabouts. The information on the head-up display is constantly changing, and the search system is constantly scanning as the infrared signal increases. The target lock frame has successfully encircled the target and entered the tracking state. The lieutenant chose the R-73 missile, which was the most reliable sneak attack weapon. Unfortunately, there were only 2 on his plane, and the rest of the pylons were filled with bulky semi-active radar-guided missiles, which was Lieutenant Colonel Mosen's preferred attack method. The lieutenant first pressed the weapon preparation switch according to the procedure, turned on the power of the R-73 seeker, and finally started to flash the sign that allowed the launch. If he can't hold his breath, he can launch missiles now. Infrared-guided weapons can be launched when the target distance and speed are unknown. As long as the person pressing the button dares to pat his chest to ensure that the other party is indeed within range. In Goya's experience, if he can barely see a small plane like a Mirage 3 or a MiG-21 in broad daylight, the distance is roughly between 8 and 10 kilometers. But he can't see the plane clearly yet, so he has to keep tracking. The dotted target on the head-up display was divided into 2 parts. It was now determined that there were more than one enemy plane, and the signal of the previous one was very unclear, perhaps blocked by clouds and fog. Dude, we only have 2 combat missiles. Why don't we use fire control radars and fire them with radar-guided missiles? Jafar said. No, we're still in the dark, and we can't give up this advantage easily. You have to help me keep an eye on the ground radar to the west. They have some mobile missile positions west of the line.